welcome back to my channel. It is only 1 month into the new year and so much has happened already. Last time I spoke with Logan, the CEO and founder of Zeitgeist, and today we have three very driven men on the show for you. The community even knows one of them to have the word brain in his name. So please welcome Composable Finance, Brainjar, Marmite, and Zane. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, good to meet you.
So we're just going to start by going through, and if you could give us just a very brief description of your role at Composable.
Cool, I'll jump off. My name's Zane, I'm CMO. I head up all things marketing and comms.
Sweet, yeah, I'm Marmite Toast. Most people probably just see me from shitposting on Twitter, but yeah, I'm also head of strategy and ecosystem at Composable.
I love that.
I'm the founder and head of product of Composable.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. That's fantastic. So my first question is just a very basic question, but as I am newer to your project and still learning as well, can you tell us a little bit, kind of like in a nutshell, about what Composable Finance is and how does it work?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Composable has really evolved a lot over the past few months, but really it was started on the foundation that I truly believe in a cross-chain future and not a multi-chain future, where applications should not be fragmented, not only in their liquidity, but also in their functionalities as well. And so looking at basically what KUSAMA has inspired us to build, which is a series of parachains that are able to communicate with each other, I find it interesting to be able to use a parachain as a foundational layer for just cross ecosystem communication and orchestration. And so Composable in a nutshell is really just trying to enable applications that will have different parts of it. So for instance, say a leverage trading application could have different components of that application deployed on different ecosystems entirely, but utilize the Composable infrastructure to be able to communicate natively. And so that's kind of like the foundational vision of the project. But in doing so, we've also sort of now ventured down collaborating with Composable Labs, building applications on this infrastructure to show people what cross-chain communication and how cross-chain messaging actually can enable additional yields through the reduction of liquidity fragmentation across ecosystems. But also too, like, we're fundamentally committed to the KUSAMA ecosystem and introducing primitives that the ecosystem deserves from us, as substrate palettes. So again, like, not trying to basically become an EVM compatible or smart contract chain, more so focused on utilizing the beautiful features of substrate and driving TVL to the ecosystem so that our vision regarding cross-chain communication can actually be enabled.
Right. You know what I love about that is actually when I've been speaking with different projects and especially yourselves, it just fits in so well with kind of the whole idea of the KUSAMA ecosystem and interoperability and how this all works. And especially being, substrate, there's a lot of EVM type projects. So it's really nice to have that feature for sure. So where does Composable then fit into like Web3 and what does Web3 even look like to you?
I see Web3 as really just, this like new paradigm of thinking where everything is individual ownership is prioritized over centralization of not only assets, but also the way we do business, the way we operate in the real world. And for me, Web3 as a whole comprises all of these different ecosystems. I'm not an ecosystem maxi, never have been, probably never will. And I believe that Web3 as a whole is only stronger if the different ecosystems can actually become interconnected to enable Web3, the Web3 vision, which is let's build and collaborate and tie all these ecosystems together. Because as we talk about decentralization, there's no need for fragmentation in the effort to combat centralization, which obviously has been the norm since the Industrial Revolution. So yeah.
Right, absolutely. Awesome. So then, like in terms of Composable, you guys have been very kind of active with other projects, which I love, and I think .sama is pretty infamous for that. I mean, the projects all work really well together. But could you tell me about some of the current or future partnerships? I actually saw on Polka House Spaces chat that you were assisting Remark even to build palettes for substrate parachains. But can you tell us a little bit about that?
On this one, yeah, I think like the big thing is that, if we're trying to come out with this cross-chain ecosystem, this big, Web3 vision, like whilst Polkadot and substrates like core part of our underlying architecture, I think we're really emphasizing, the importance of other ecosystems. So like Brainjar says, right, we're not a maxi on .sama, and the reason we're using .sama as kind of our base layer is because it allows us to create this cross-chain hub that then, lets us tap into everything else. So I think like the first main partnership that really is of significance of value to us is kind of what we're doing with all the IBC stuff. So like when we talk about the Centauri bridge, that's kind of like our big route to tap into, all of this exciting stuff that's happening in Cosmos and with the IBC chains like Secret Network. And you're seeing it now, right, with Osmosis, like the TVL and the growth is just huge. So like as we build out on .sama and even as we make it a core part of our strategy, we're very, very focused on, not neglecting other L1s and L2s. So I think that's the same thing. Like we have each different part. So we have Mosaic, which, takes into account like all EVM scaling solutions. We have Centauri, which takes into account, the IBC chains and everything happening there. And then we have our two parachains, which obviously natively have cross-chain interoperability within .sama itself. And then by actually having these L1s ourselves, we can make those the hubs from which everything can connect. So like that's kind of the goal of, being able to tap into any ecosystem and be able to scale, right? Because I think that's the thing, like if you look at crypto space as a whole now, there's a lot of L1s, there's a lot of L2s, they're all doing pretty well, like every other week, there's a different network that's doing amazing, like Phantom will have a great run, Avalanche will have a great run, Harmony will have an amazing run, and they all do have their own specialities that, bring users and TVL in. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but is that really what the future of multi-chain, cross-chain, Web3 looks like? Probably not, right? So how do we actually then get from where we are now to a point where a user doesn't have to even care what chain they use, and liquidity can actually flow seamlessly between all these layers and chains? And then that's kind of like the first point, which is, kind of how we've laid our roadmap as well, because you can't just do this overnight. So by building out on Picasso and on Polkadot, we kind of build the foundation to have these bridges, to have that initial connectivity. And then from there, you build the ecosystem that truly puts you into this, chain agnostic space. So it's definitely a grand vision, but I think we have each kind of part pretty well mapped out to achieve it. So
I was just going to say that is a big vision. You guys have a lot going on, and I think that's what makes it so wonderful. Is there's so many parts involved and so much to it. So I'm really excited to share this. But so, like in terms of your future, then the future of composable finance, what are your plans then moving forward? Like, what do you have going on from here?
So first up is the Picasso parachain. So that's kind of one of the next biggest things in our overall roadmap. And that's obviously huge because that kind of kickstarts our journey into .sama on another level. So we're going to launch that. And like I say, you see us on Twitter posting about KUSAMA season and stuff like this. And whilst it's a bit of a meme, like we're very serious in that we see KUSAMA as a huge opportunity. It has the opportunity to be able to be one of the leading networks. That's why we've decided to build there, and ultimately, it's our goal as builders, as a team, to be able to actually realize that. So yeah, Picasso's coming soon. With that, we hope to release, the core DeFi primitives that people actually need. So whether that's a DEX with decent liquidity, whether that's decent yield opportunities, whether that's a lending market, just these core primitives, like every other L1 and L2 will have these, and they can't succeed without it, and they will have decent yield farming opportunities. They'll all have this, right? So for us, it's just using Picasso to actually kickstart that KUSAMA season. And then the big thing after Picasso is Mosaic, which is Brainjar's favorite thing, so I'll let him go into more detail on that. But yeah, essentially Mosaic is it's not just a bridge, it's not a bridge aggregator, it is kind of the next generation of liquidity. So that's, like we say, you know, that will be the route for users to be able to actually be able to seamlessly move between all these L1s and L2s. And yeah, that's coming pretty much at the same time as Picasso. And then I think we've already mentioned, you know, how Mosaic itself will already be a palette on Picasso. And then, yeah, as you've seen with all of the other stuff we're doing, Bribe, Instrumental, etc., they're all coming out at the same time. But yeah, I definitely want Brainjar to touch on Mosaic, since, you know, I think that's quite slept on, and I don't.
That was actually my
realize,
next question. I'd love to hear more about Mosaic.
Brainjar's the man for that.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I've seen a lot of bridges in the space. Obviously, there's like popular ones that people use all the time. The biggest thing I think that I wanted to think about when architecting a proper transfer system between chains and between ecosystems was just maximizing user experience, which means maximizing the ability, like the amount of capital that can be transferred in a single transaction, minimizing the time and minimizing the fees. And so because of this, we've sort of like architected this liquidity layer for cross-chain transactions that actually taps into other, basically has, you know, three main components. First, you know, we have single-sided staking. So now users with just USDC and WETH and other assets will be able to stake these assets in a single-sided manner and obtain yield directly from the fees generated from transacting. And so that's obviously sort of like a new revenue generating opportunity in the ecosystem that is unlike any other seen so far. Number two is this, again, this fee that's associated with transfers. Our fee is dynamic. It's unlike any other fee model for transfers, where it's mathematically fluctuating based on source and destination liquidity. And how we minimize fees is in this kind of third component, which is a combination of passive liquidity rebalancing and active sort of bot facilitated management. So this like general catch-all concept of liquidity management. What's actually happening here is, as transfers are requested by users behind the scenes, liquidity in our system is moving, is basically moving based on forecasting of where liquidity actually needs to go, and is then moved through other bridges, or actually tapping into other bridges to get the necessary liquidity latency that we need in order to facilitate transfers, you know, again, to maximize the amount of liquidity that can be transferred from chain to chain. And then another really sort of interesting component that's, we made this sort of like a competitive system so that we could maximize depth and the amounts of liquidity in the system. So to compete with this passive rebalancing forecasting system that we're running, we also are open sourcing a sort of bot facilitated process as well. So basically anybody around the world, if they have liquidity, they're able to read the mempools of different chains, estimate the fees that they'd be able to make by providing this liquidity to facilitate transfers, and quickly provide liquidity to the respective chain that needs the liquidity, thereby earning the fee. And so there's this like concept of MEV, which is like, you know, we have, it's like minor extractable value, where basically bots are doing all different things like front running, sandwich attacks, et cetera, et cetera. This is actually a case where bots are actually quite useful and are actually a benefit to the system, because we're able to broaden the depth of liquidity that the system as a whole has in a very competitive manner. Anything relating to bots is very competitive, and we hope that the broader bot ecosystem sees this as a new opportunity for them to make yields, thereby sort of having this additional sort of cushion of liquidity provided by these kind of external figures. And this feature in and of itself is radical, and no one's really done that before. And so very interested to see how the system just operates overall.
Wow, so that's big news. Really interesting, actually. I think Mosaic is really a big piece of the puzzle. It sounds like. So that's exciting. Really nice to hear that. So then, in terms of the other part of Composable, so Picasso and PICA. I did notice it has an artistic nature given the name. Can you tell us a little bit about what Picasso is and where the name came from?
Yeah, so I think for me, I've always been interested in art and really sort of like have been pretty disappointed in like just all things related to how products do UIs and design and stuff like that. It's all very quite boring. And when you think about cross-chain ecosystems, like other competing protocols, like will have kind of space themes or like different random themes that just make them feel like sort of every other like DeFi project in the space. And so I really wanted people to remember and take away that what we are doing here is creating art by introducing a whole new way of thinking about how to transact across the broader ecosystem, across, you know, .sama, ETH, Solana, Cosmos, etc. And so Picasso really just made the most sense as a name to basically embody a person who pushed the limits of basically art and artistic talent. And that's kind of how we see like our parachain in comparison to the broader Web3 ecosystem.
Amazing. I really like that analogy, actually. Sorry, did you have something to add there, Marmite? You looked like
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think the unique thing with Picasso, the parachain, is that like a lot of other parachains are doing some cool stuff, but I think we're taking quite a novel approach of treating Picasso really as an L1. And I think, yeah, like Brainjar touches on, like, a lot of this is quite new, just in general, right? Not just for .sama, but using kind of a parachain as the substrate L1, where we then build our own protocols, we build our own primitives. Like, that is a pretty unique approach. And like fundamentally, just in terms of KUSAMA itself, like whether it's us doing it or somebody else, I think that is quite a big necessity for the ecosystem to grow as a whole. Because like, especially from our perspective, you know, it is such a new ecosystem, just in terms of substrate, the language, like having the developers, you know, obviously doesn't compete when you look at everybody building on Solidity and there, right? Like for a builder, it's much easier to just go onto an EVM chain and launch stuff there, right? It's just much more of a familiar experience. So for us, it's like we use Picasso as the entry point for all other builders into the .sama ecosystem. You know, it is our responsibility to build the primitives. So that's why we have Pablo, so people can have a DEX. That's why we'll have Angular, so people can borrow and, you know, actually get capital efficiency from all of their tokens. That's why we'll have Whirlpool, so people can have DeFi privacy. But then we kind of take that a step further and say, you know, we're then opening Picasso up to become the blank canvas, like to pardon the pun of the name. So yeah, like that's the kind of stuff we're doing with Ohm, where, you know, builders that may not be able to do this by themselves, but still want to go multi-chain, they can do that through Picasso, right? And I think that's what makes Picasso and Composable so bullish. It's like, yeah, a team might be able to build a DEX, they might be able to build a good protocol, but do they have all the infrastructure around it, right? That's what makes it really valuable. And it goes the other direction. Other teams can build bridges. Like, sure, we're not reinventing the wheel, but to be able to have it into one single cohesive ecosystem where you can bridge into Picasso and use all the protocols, or you can use the protocols and then bridge to anything via Mosaic or via Centauri. That's kind of the finishing touch that makes it stand apart like so differently from, I think, everything else we're seeing. So again, not a small task, but that's where the ship or die meme comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes you guys kind of so unique. It's quite impressive, right? Like it really separates you apart from other projects that way. So can you tell us a little bit more about, there's been some talk a little bit about Composable Labs. So I want to hear more about this project. I hear this is like a testing lab that Composable has come up with. So what's involved with this?
Yeah, I think like Composable Labs is obviously plays a big role in everything we're doing, because I mean, like you've seen, right, from the outside perspective for a user, they're seeing that we're building all of the infrastructure. They're seeing that we're building our own chains. They're seeing that we're partnering with a lot of people. So I think Composable Labs itself plays quite a significant role, because whilst we're building a lot of this infrastructure, you know, and offering that as a tool for other protocols to use, we're also building on top of it ourselves, right? So Composable Labs is the incubator to which we can build like a lot of cool stuff with our own infrastructure, right? So that's like you've seen recently with Instrumental. Instrumental is super cool protocol, like has a very clear value add. You put your LP position into Instrumental and it will move it to the highest yielding layer. Like something like that sounds like such a simple thing, but just doesn't exist. And the reason like the Instrumental can do that is because it uses Mosaic, right? So Composable Labs just acts as this, facilitator to leverage everything else we're building. And I think like when you put it in the picture, the broader picture of Composable itself, it just shows you the scale of what we're building, right? The fact that we're not only building our own infrastructure, we're not only building our own protocols, but we actually then have this extension that researches, that incubates, that partners with everybody else. Like that's why I think, Composable is a bit of a dark horse because, people kind of see bits of it. They see a bit of Mosaic, like, is that a bridge? They see a bit of Picasso, is that a parachain? They see like these small bits in between, but I think people are now starting to see this, as this one single giant ecosystem that it is. So yeah, Composable Labs definitely plays a big role in just actually using our infrastructure to build some really cool tools.
Yeah, and just on that point too, I guess more than just also like facilitation, I think there's this idea of really pushing forward the problems which we see arising in the space. So when we're doing the research and we're actually putting in the time and we've got so many gigabrains coming together, what are the problems that need to be solved, right? And that's where Composable Labs has a really cool opportunity to come in, because not only is it just dynamic projects coming in, but we're actually solving from the things which we are identifying through our building. So this cycle continues, and that's why you have this consistent expansion. For me, I get really excited about Composable Labs, just generally speaking, because the utility beyond also just our ecosystem, beyond that is very important. So what are the problems currently concerning Web3 at large? How can we solve them within our own ecosystem and make them more robust? And that comes through a variety of things. It can come through research support, helping mathematize some of these issues so that they are becoming more stringent in their processes and protocols which they're going to be deploying. It can come in the form of us supporting in some ways in helping them deploy and strengthen their marketing teams, because ultimately founders in this space are very isolated. Like CT can tell you otherwise, it can tell you that everyone is collaborating all the time. But we know that like right now, we need to improve the culture as a whole. So generally, when I see the Composable Labs ecosystem and what's actually taking place there, when we talk about evolution and the future plan, Composable Labs is a rudimentary part of that. Because if we need to arrive at absolute ecosystem agnosticism, as is mentioned by Brainjar in one of his articles, I think that really wraps up the vision really well. Composable Labs is that critical piece which will make all these other assets a success. So that's something which I'm very, very hot on. And I genuinely think that moving forward, 2022 is going to be the year of Composable Labs.
I love to hear that. That is some good energy. And actually, Zain, it was nice to hear from you, because I think this next question is actually directed for you. So I know your team has been very busy with development. Can you tell us a little bit more then about expansion of the projects and deployment, et cetera?
So in terms of expansion, I think Brainjar as head of product would be much more fitted to answer that question. But in terms of, generally speaking, in terms of the content which is coming out as well and being produced, we do have this saying, which is ship or die. And that ship or die started off maybe as a meme, but it's actually an ethos and a philosophy, which I think underpins all of our marketing communication, but is actually synergistic to the development which is taking place. A lot of people are positioning themselves in Q1 to start speaking about some of the innovation that they will do in Q4, right? We hit I'm sorry to say this very blatantly, but we hit the ground running in 2022 with a very bullish plan for Picasso, and what's to come with Mosaic is going to also blow people away. And it's not even something which is planned, in another month. It's coming next week. We'll have this plan rolled out as well. And in terms of ship or die as a whole, like I say that there is something here which is about intellectual rigor, which definitely is required, because these are complex problems. And in order to answer complex problems, you need complex solutions. So a lot of the times people say when they come to composable finance, especially to me, your articles are too complicated. They're too sophisticated. You're touching on too much math here. whilst we do recognize that we are also serving the community, really and truly, we're here to solve these problems. So it's well and good that we have like memes going out, and I think memes are very, very important. But from us, in terms of the amount of content we're shipping, it's not just mediocre content. Every single piece which is going out looks and responds to some of the complex problems that Composable is also answering. But beyond that, is also posing to the ecosystem at large. So that's why I think there has been some sort of change in terms of how other projects are also beginning to look at the ecosystem at large and the role they play and the responsibility they play. Ultimately, I'd say that like this is something we want to stay consistent with, because if we are to solve for Web3 mass adoption, then you need to really overcome these obstacles first and foremost. So that's from the like marketing perspective, because a lot of the times I hear like there's so much alpha coming out, like it's no longer alpha leaks, it's just consistent alpha being produced. But the reason behind that is because there are so many ideas which are cooked up, but they're not just ideas in isolation. They've been thought through and they've been problematized, and then they've gone to shipping, and that is in tandem with the project development which is taking place. So we're going to continue from a marketing perspective to share and to push. A lot of projects want to hide their giga brains. We want to display them as much as possible. We want to share that knowledge to ensure that everyone in the ecosystem is benefiting, but more importantly, is becoming more robust in their solving. So we're just one piece in this big puzzle. Hopefully we're a significant one after that round.
We are, Zain. I know, I just want to add to Zain, like that's like the energy that Zain's given is why we all enjoy what we're doing, right? And why we say ship or die and why we're posting is because we're all genuinely super motivated to actually deliver on this, right? You know, like Zain says, marketing at another crypto shop or whatever, like might play a different role, but at Composable, we're genuinely all working together every single day, discussing ideas, bouncing things off. And I think people can tell, right? Like, you know, it looks kind of at first glance like we're just putting articles out there, but when you actually read and you see the content and the level of detail that comes out, and, you know, for each product that we ship, it has a clear roadmap, it has a clear line of articles, it has detailed follow-ups. Like, that's why Zain, you know, and every other team plays such a key role in everything we do. Like, it's not just marketing, it's not just tech, it's not just any one thing. Like, we all come together to like actually work towards this vision. So I think that's why, like, hopefully the energy that we're all trying to give off, just, you know, as a collective as well, is that, you know, ship or die is genuinely, you know, why we're all here. And, you know, hopefully people are now starting to realize that as well.
Yeah, well, CT, I mean, is such a diverse space too. And I really like what you guys are doing actually with your information, because you have a whole bunch of people, you have these giga brains, you have these people who maybe are a little bit more visual or new to the space, or, you know, just not quite as advanced. So it's really nice to see you come from all aspects, because really any information you want about Composable is there, like if right from the marketing down to like the most technical information. So that's really nice, because it gives this really well-rounded or broad scope to your project, which is really neat to see. So what was really interesting to me is I actually read an article by Mr. Brainjar about cross-chain versus multi-chain. And this is something I'd love to hear on voice. Let's have a very brief kind of little debate about cross-chain versus multi-chain. What do you think is more important and why?
I mean, what is the point of multi-chain, right? Like, I mean, yeah, it's cool to have Yearn deployed on multiple different ecosystems, but like, who cares, right? It's like, yeah, cool. Yearn gets to have on DeFi Llama that they have that they have TVL on Phantom and TVL on ETH and TVL on whatever, but like, does it actually matter? Like, every single new chain that gets spun up is a new ecosystem for yield. It's like no different than a new market that gets set up for executing stock trades. For instance, I wrote the first ever article I ever put out on my Twitter was basically just talking about exactly this concept, that, you know, we have cross-chain versus multi-chain is very much so like how the evolution of the stock market happened, where initially you had NYSE, and then now all of a sudden you have NASDAQ, you have all these different exchanges, and then what really turbocharged the ecosystem was dark pools, and was these like order matching services that let people be able to make an order and then be able to have it executed on any one of these markets based on best execution. And so it was only when the ecosystem within stock trading decided to build, orchestration layers for having these different markets communicate with each other, did we end up having the result where now you can trade on Robinhood and where you can trade on all these different things that are like super easy to use and very retail friendly. But had that not happened, we would have continued to live in a world where you'd have to go call your stockbroker to make a specific trade on a very specific place. And this is exactly the world that I would like to avoid for Web3, because we cannot have fluid ownership of assets as individuals if these assets get fragmented on and stuck basically on different chains and ecosystems. And there's no need for all these different ecosystems to have their own individual isolated innovations when it could just be really easy for them to communicate with each other. And of course, there's the argument, well, isn't it more secure if they're just separated? And to some extent, that's true, but there are different ways to combat these security concerns. I mentioned cross-chain governance with this whole like 51% attack potential solution. There's also like, different strategies for insurance that we're also exploring and stuff like that. But I fundamentally believe that the benefits of joining these ecosystems together, even starting with very simple things from like just liquidity provisioning on multiple different chains at the same time, making orders on different ecosystems based on best execution, like these very simple things just make a lot of sense. And as much as we want to pretend that a lot of this stuff doesn't come from, it's not inspired by TradFi, the reality is that it is. And, if this worked in TradFi, it probably will work in DeFi as well.
Right. That's what I really like to hear is, I think, a lot of people have a very specific opinion about it, like you do, and probably the same opinion. But to hear you speak on it is quite interesting. Thank you for speaking on that. I actually really enjoyed that. Another thing I wanted to touch on too, was Bribe protocol. I was reading that it maximizes yield for underutilized tokens. And how will this work with Composable? And can you tell us a bit more about this?
So sure, yeah. So Bribe, is one of our incubated protocols through Composable Labs, and I think it tries to solve a very simple problem. So like I'll try and break it down of why an average user should care about Bribe. I mean, like right now, there's 1,000,001 different governance tokens in DeFi, right? And we could argue all day long about the actual inherent value of that, and as the inherent value of tokens itself, right? Like if it doesn't have revenue share, if it doesn't have actual governance rights, then what's the value? And I think it's pretty honest and fair to say that the participation for governance across a lot of protocols is relatively low and centered around like a very small handful of wallets. So Bribe kind of comes up with the solution to this obvious problem of, well, if we could find a way to make the average token holder earn additional yield whilst creating this platform where bribery can happen in a transparent and open place, then everybody wins, right? Because what that really means is, for example, like let's take kind of one of the first proposals for Bribe to like break it down. So Aave is like the lending and borrowing platform. You have to vote to get assets listed on there. And Frax, for example, the stablecoin, isn't listed on there. So, how can they really do that? So with Bribe, we create a pool of Aave tokens, staked Aave tokens. And the use case of these tokens any other time would be zero. Like you can't do anything with these tokens otherwise. So you stake these staked Aave tokens into the Bribe pool. Then the highest bidder, so for example, the Frax protocol itself, or somebody who has interest in getting Frax listed on Aave, they would then essentially bid to win the voting power of that pool. That bid is then shared across the pool, which translates to yield for the Aave stakers. And then naturally, the Frax protocol itself has that extra governance power. So I mean, all of this stuff is already happening, right? Like protocols are already bribing other large OTC holders to be able to do this in the background, right? Like it happens all the time, and it's kind of the background for the curve wars and stuff like this, right? Like these governance tokens are being bribed essentially already to be able to win these governance votes to have liquidity, right? That's what everybody's fighting over, the liquidity at the end of the day. So by having Bribe, we, like I say, we create this, you know, battleground where people can actually bid for the governance power, but it's decentralized, it's open, it's transparent. And yeah, like we see that as just another protocol that adds into the stack that we're building at Composable. And yeah, like Brainjar says, it adds a pretty, you know, pretty necessary element to governance to begin with. And it almost seems too obvious, right? Like, why doesn't this exist already? So yeah, that's kind of an example of where Composable Labs comes in as well, right? Because whilst that's the first step for Bribe, like these obvious use cases of being able to transparently bribe protocols like Aave and Curve, it then adds another element of, okay, well then we can implement that onto Polkadot and KUSAMA, right? So for all the stuff we're doing on Picasso, for example, we could then, you know, use Bribe to be able to decide where liquidity is placed and where farming incentives are placed, right? So whilst it starts off small, like the vision for an incubated protocol like Bribe is just as big as everything else we build. So
I really like what you said about, you know, bringing something obvious, because it is kind of, and just knowing that it is in the background, bringing it to the forefront seems like such a, you know, a smart idea ultimately. So that's really neat. The next questions I have for you guys are more just fun questions. So anything I ask, feel free to answer. No comment if you don't want to comment on it, but these are just some fun things. But the first thing actually is for Marmite. And I actually just wanted to ask about an art piece I saw from Yumi. It's
okay, it's a good question. I thought
yeah, she's a notable NFT artist in our community, and I know it was gifted to you. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so Yumi, yeah, I love Yumi's work. So yeah, shout out to Yumi. But yeah, like, I mean, I try and be very active in the community. It's where I come from as well. Like, and you know, I think we've tried to make it clear that we value the community in general with everything we're doing. Like, it's how we won our parachain slots. It's the users of our protocols at the end of the day, right? So for us, yeah, the community is huge. And yeah, so I always try and support artists, you know, NFT stuff. So yeah, Yumi is one of the awesome artists on Singular. Just been following her for a while. And one of the first things, I think it was one of the first things I did actually when I joined Composable, is that we did like a Picasso collab. So yeah, we gave that away actually on Twitter. And I think it was another KUSAMA DGen that won it. So they were quite lucky. But yeah, we did a collaboration where she did the Picasso themed pieces, and she very generously gifted me one of the versions. So yeah, thank you very much, Yumi. Much appreciated.
I love that. Actually, I'll actually just did a giveaway with an art piece from Yumi and Merlua. So awesome. Yeah, their art pieces are quite amazing. Actually, they've done some awesome things in the community. It was a beautiful piece. So Mr. Brainjar, I want to know about your name. I've been curious to know about your name. The word brain in there really makes a statement, and it's no secret that you are definitely of genius status. I saw you've been trained in physics originally, also.
Yeah, I mean, it's really that wasn't really the intended connotation. Honestly, the connotation really is just like the fact that a lot of people that just have worked with me over the years on various things have always referred to me as just a brain in the jar, because it seems like I'm online 24/7 and always doing stuff, and always like pushing people to, like, you know, operate at the same level of intensity that I do on a day-to-day basis. And so, yeah, that's really just like, that's kind of where the name kind of came from. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm so happy you told me that.
I was gonna say his avatar is actually very realistic. Like those 8 different arms, like I think that's real. You know, the speed at which Brainjar replies and is always online. I believe it. So.
Do you agree, Zane?
Yeah, 100%. The V1 and V2 of the PFP definitely is an accurate representation of our head of product and founder. But yeah, genuinely, It's really nice working with a team which is so committed to just at the end of the day solving but supporting each other too. And like I guess this is one of the key things of working at Composable too. But like yeah, genuinely, I very rarely come across people that like who fit the bill basically. And I think there's no other name which Brainjar should go by ever. Like he is definitely a brain in a jar, which is crucial to Composable and its success.
Well, and a huge asset to the crypto space in general, really,
100%.
and to the whole ecosystem. So that's quite amazing. And that brings me to just say you do have quite the team with a quite an extensive resumes. And I think the team behind the project itself is extremely important. Like really, that's the basis. And you can have this great idea, but if you don't have the team to deliver, you run into problems there. So can you tell us a little bit about your team and how you came together? You guys are stacked.
It's a good question. How did we come together? I guess like for me personally, I was wrapping up with another project, starting like doing a bit of research at Cambridge, and when I had a conversation with Brainjar, I was just blown away by and essentially being very refreshed by this vision, which considered all these other different elements which we've touched upon throughout this this podcast. So for me, it just made sense at the time to join because ultimately I wanted to be in a space where building is not just an afterthought and everyone is collectively involved. Less about the aesthetics of something. And it was actually my first time properly engaging with an Anon profile too, which was a real challenge for me. But I'll be very honest, I've literally relished that challenge and really enjoyed being here. And as the team continues to expand, the diversity of the team, I think, is a crucial part to the success and the success of Composable moving forward too. So that's something which we are conscious to when we're building out teams, and moving forward is something we want to continue doing. And I think it's a rudimentary part of why Composable is so bullish, that you can have people of different ages, different walks of life, different time zones coming together and solving. And so I think that's when you get the robust, like sort of why these ideas, when they're presented, are so robust, is because so many people can have a say in that. And there's so many challenges which come at the same time. The challenges create good solutions. So the more that you can challenge each other, the more that you can be open and honest, I think that creates conducive and like productive cultures in Web 2. It creates bullish culture and ultra alpha in our spaces, but it's something which we should definitely continue, and long may it last.
Absolutely. I think ultra alpha is the perfect description for you all. Absolutely. That is your title. The ultra alpha. So just to close off here, is there any final thoughts or anything you would like to add?
I'll hand this one over to Mama.
Oh, no pressure. No, I think like we've kind of covered, our general vision and where we're going. And I think definitely since, like Zane said, we've kicked this year off strong with kind of what we're doing for Picasso. And I think people are slowly realizing the scope and scale of Composable. Like I say, like a lot of people can build dexes, a lot of people can build bridges, but not a lot of people can build it all within one single ecosystem. With the resources, with the vision, with the ability to actually deliver it. So that's why, that's the only reason I joined Composable, and it's the only reason I'm genuinely so bullish, because I think what we're doing is just quite exciting and it's definitely innovative. But yeah, and I think the .sama space definitely needs it, So I think what we're doing with Picasso, hopefully, in the not too distant future, will really give people a glimpse, because like it's still hard to conceptualize, right? Like a lot of people read our stuff and they get an understanding that Brainjar is genuinely a huge giga brain, and they can see the amount of effort and work that goes into it. But until you actually touch it and start using it, it's still quite hard to imagine, right? So I'm just super excited to get our first products out there in the wild. Like Mosaic's going to be huge. It's really going to be a game changer for just liquidity across all L1s and L2s. And same for Picasso. Like I really hope Picasso kickstarts the KUSAMA season and really, gives KUSAMA the credit it deserves. So yeah, I think when we say ship or die, when we say KUSAMA season, we're saying it lightheartedly because, you can't take yourself seriously 99% of the time. But we also are like truly committed to that. And like you've seen from this call, right? We all enjoy what we do. Like Zane said, we're all super supportive of each other. The culture here is just genuinely quite fun to be a part of. And yeah, like I'm a bit biased, but if there's any team I'd want to trust to actually deliver on such a big vision, then it would be, you know, Brainjar and the rest of the guys here. So that's my final thoughts.
That was a great final thoughts. Brain, did you want to add?
Can I do a quick plug? Is that all right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Podcast and any part of this for some reason has inspired you, hopefully been inspired by the content, the article, the shipments which are going out more so than seeing mine and Marmite's face. Brainjar's PFP is obviously very inspiring, but I'll say this much, that if you are inspired by this and you are ship or die, come on board. Like, we are open, we're hiring to drop us a DM, have a conversation. There's different ways that you can engage. It doesn't mean that you need to come and work for us. If there's something you want to solve and we can support you through Composable Labs, our doors are always open, DMs are always open. Doesn't matter if it's official accounts or our private accounts or personal accounts, just feel free to just drop us a line. And ultimately, there's something which just popped to my mind, which we forgot to cover. It's actually a really funny anecdote, which summarizes the culture. The Parachain win, which we had, which was a great achievement, and through the support of the community. And in any other space or any other project, you'd think, okay, 186 million, let's go full guns blazing, let's celebrate, fireworks, all this. But internally, it was a great milestone. We're really grateful for the community and their contribution. It was like 2 hours internally, great, nice Zoom call, nice Google Hangouts, but we're back to shipping and everyone's happy with it, because it's the whole thing of, and that's, I think, why the community believed in us so much to support us in that round too. But ultimately, that's what we're about. Like, the things which we get a kick out of, is having some fun whilst we're creating, but ultimately it's that idea of creation, pushing creativity into problem solving, creating, and ultimately ship or die. So I'm going to hand over to...
Ship or die.
I mean, the last thing I was just going to say as well, it's like, I've definitely interfaced with a lot of the people building in KUSAMA, and I just wanted to also just add on to what Marmite and Zane are saying, which is fundamentally, I don't think any other team can outwork us. And I think like that is obviously bullish in itself, but also just like, I'm very unhappy with the current state of affairs that's just prevailing in KUSAMA as normalcy. And so it's definitely a very important topic for us to sort of like really, it may seem definitely very aggressive that we're trying to basically come in and conquer / dominate the ecosystem as much as we can to push out all these new products. But fundamentally, like, there needs to be a full push on all fronts, like not only getting the KUSAMA treasury involved, not only getting parity involved, but like all these different sort of groups really just need to be pushed to get the ecosystem where it's playing. I mean, if we want this ecosystem to be where it should be playing, if we want this ecosystem to be playing at the same level as Solana, imagine how much needs to happen. And so we're hoping to be the the group that can, personally push the ecosystem forward in a very sort of tangible way. And so, I think anybody that's interested in shaping the future of KUSAMA should be interested in, working with Composable.
Well, I think it's no secret, your guys' devotion to this project, really, and the long hours you've spent on it. It sounds like you really are an incredibly hardworking project. So I really appreciate, that being said, I really appreciate the time you've taken to come on here and inform myself and inform the community. It's been wonderful talking to all of you, and I much appreciate your time. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
See you guys.
You're a shooting star, I see a vision of